I don't actually have anything written down for this, but I wanted to talk about this because I was reading this article this week and it's so disturbing that I just wanted to vent. It's a really good article. It's in the Atlantic. It's called Why Evangelicals Turn Their Back on PEPFAR by Peter Wehner, who has been critical of conservative Christians by and large, and he's religious himself. But basically, if you know nothing else about PEPFAR, if you were around during the George W. Bush administration, you know George W. Bush, horrible policies, Iraq war, not a good guy. Before Trump, he was the worst Republican president ever, right? One of the few things he did that was genuinely good is a thing called PEPFAR. And that stands for the President's Emergency Plan for AIDS Relief. And it was authorized by Bush in 2003, according to this article. Basically, the US government said, we are going to make a financial commitment to address HIV and AIDS. And according to the article, PEPFAR is credited with saving 26 million lives, enabling almost 8 million babies to be born without HIV. It transformed the landscape of the HIV epidemic and helped stabilize the African continent. Not only is PEPFAR the single most successful policy to date in US Africa relations, it is also one of the most successful foreign policy programs in US history, according to one Brookings Institution fellow. So, PEPFAR, hands down, a wonderful thing our government did to help Africa deal with the HIV and AIDS crisis. Like, George W. Bush should be proud of that. Republicans should be proud of that. It was a good program. The problem is, then Donald Trump came in and he thinks helping any other country is not putting America first. So you may have heard already that the Trump administration this time around has already dismantled something called USAID, which is the governmental organization that provides humanitarian aid around the world. Well, when Trump and his administration and the Republican Party dismantled USAID, they also dismantled PEPFAR. PEPFAR gets, this is also from the article, check this out. How much money do they get? They get 0.08% of the federal budget. It's so small, but it has been consistently judged to be a highly effective and accountable program. They did get a limited waiver in February, allowing it to continue life-saving HIV services, but the implementation of that waiver has been delayed, fragmented, and chaotic. So basically, the Trump administration destroyed USAID, they destroyed PEPFAR, and even if they're trying to put Band-Aids on the whole thing now, sorry, they broke it. And here's the question that Wehner is posing to everybody now. Even if the Trump administration decided tomorrow that they were going to reactivate PEPFAR, it's broken. You cannot recreate something that took 20 years to achieve. And I'll say this before I get into other stuff. Look at what they're saying now. More than 75,000 adults and children are now estimated to have died because the US government shut down PEPFAR 6 months ago. 75,000 people are dead. Another adult life is being lost every 3 minutes. A child dies every 31 minutes. Ending PEPFAR could result in as many as 11 million additional new HIV infections and nearly 3 million additional AIDS-related deaths by the end of the decade. That's what Republicans have done because they just do whatever Donald Trump wants. So that's the problem with PEPFAR. And the question that Peter Wehner is asking, rightly so, I think, in this article in The Atlantic, is how come you don't hear a lot of right-wing evangelical pastors and churches speaking out against this destruction? Because this is one of those things. Earlier in this live stream, someone asked, how come churches don't spend money on good things? And as I said, also in response to that, there are churches that do a lot of genuinely good humanitarian work. And this is something Republicans did that is genuinely good humanitarian work, and now it's gone. and you don't hear Republican elected officials talking about it, and you don't hear conservative Christian pastors talking about it. And that's the question that Wehner is asking. Why not? And in the course of the article, he says there are a few reasons they're not talking about it. One of them is that a lot of Christians just don't know this is happening. They don't know what PEPFAR is. They didn't know this was going on. And that's an education problem, but also an ignorance problem. No one thinks, like, Republicans get away with this all the time. They say the government, the federal government, can do no right. We want to give money to the states to do stuff, states' rights, but the federal government, forget it. Even right now, we've seen this flooding in Texas, and FEMA has basically been dismantled. By and large, they weren't there on site immediately following the flooding. It took a while. Groups have already said, states have already said they are not getting emergency funding from the federal government, even though catastrophic floods and hurricane relief and stuff like that, states cannot, they don't have the money to help with recovery, but the federal government does. When Joe Biden was president and there was a disaster in a red state, he immediately said, yes, whatever help you need, the federal government's going to help you. Donald Trump doesn't do that, and Republicans don't care. So part of it is people just think government can do no right. And if you were brought up in an environment to think, oh, yeah, the government sucks, of course you wouldn't know about PEPFAR. It's never been brought up to you, and pastors don't talk about it in church by and large. So ignorance is part of the problem. But this was another problem that Wehner raised, a principled aversion. No, I'm going to hold off on this. I'm sorry. I saw this comment and I want to mention it because I know people have had this thought with the flooding in Texas. Greg Abbott can deal with it on his own. The problem with that sentiment is, okay, it's very easy to say, screw Texas, red state, they do a lot of damage. So you know what? Let them suffer. The problem is Texas is like almost half, when it comes to voters, they're almost half Democrats who don't want this and vote for not Greg Abbott. There's a lot of innocent people who don't vote, who have no blame for this whatsoever, and they shouldn't suffer because a bunch of Republicans in Texas elect the worst people imaginable. But also, in principle, it shouldn't matter if the destruction happens to a red state, because you will see hurricanes and things and tornadoes in a lot of red states. Texas, Florida is going to have flooding. Texas is going to have flooding. The Bible Belt's going to have a lot of tornado damage. I don't want red states to suffer. And also, I don't want California to suffer when there are wildfires. And I don't want blizzards to destroy, Midwestern states or East Coast states. This should not be a red state, blue state thing. I want all states to have the resources they need. And that's one of the good things our government could be doing. But the Trump administration and the Republicans supporting him do not understand that, or they don't care, and they just want everyone else to suffer because cruelty is the point, right? But look back at what Wehner is saying. Here's another reason Christians don't seem to care. A principled aversion to politicizing the pulpit was sometimes difficult to distinguish from a very human fear of speaking out on issues that might trigger an angry response from Trump supporters in the pews. So if you criticize the Trump administration for dismantling USAID and dismantling PEPFAR, some pastors were worried that their congregations would revolt. Maybe they would not come back to church if they think, oh, my pastor is criticizing Trump. And again, with the dismantling of the Johnson Amendment, you're going to see even more politicizing from the pulpit. So that's a different problem. This is interesting too. This was another reason pastors gave to Wehner for why they don't talk about it. This is troublesome. A minister in a church in Memphis told me it's important to recall that most evangelicals also originally viewed the HIV/AIDS issue as a result of sexual promiscuity and gay promiscuity especially. So I suspect too many of them regard the HIV/AIDS crisis as a self-inflicted contagion. They don't care about helping HIV/AIDS victims because they think, oh, it's a gay thing. And of course, the Christians who are like, we're the ethical ones, they think, oh, it's a gay disease, let them die. And so they don't care about PEPFAR for that reason, which is so sad and so disturbing. Because again, Even if it was, it's disturbing, but it's not. The people who are suffering with HIV are not like they didn't get it because they engaged in sodomy. Um, there was one quotation from Russell Moore, who's the editor in chief of Christianity Today, who is genuinely a critic of Trumpy Christianity, even though he's super conservative, anti abortion, anti gay, all that. Look at this. PEPFAR should be an easy call for evangelical Christians. It affirms human dignity and the sanctity of life in ways easily within the reach and responsibility of our country. It is hard to know whether the glee for destroying one of the most effective and successful moral reforms American evangelicals have ever supported is more sadism, cruelty for cruelty's sake, or masochism. I mean, I think he nailed it, right? This should be an easy call. This is not an ethical gray area. This is a very easy thing to support and demand, especially if you're a white evangelical who goes to a conservative church. This should be an easy thing to rally behind because you have the power to convince Republicans that they should fight for this, but they're not doing it because for whatever the reason, they just don't know about it or they don't care about it or they don't care enough to make this a big deal. They have no problem taking like 17 million people off of Medicaid. That like excites them. But millions of people unnecessarily dying of HIV and AIDS, whatever. It's Africa. They don't care. This is another thing that Wehner pointed out. There was an issue that happened a few years ago where a right-wing group called World Vision, I'm sorry, this is a decade ago in 2014, a Christian ministry called World Vision said, hey, we need more volunteers and we need more people on our staff. So if you are in a same-sex marriage, but you're Christian, we're willing to hire you. And when they announced that, right-wing Christians lost their damn minds. The charity lost more than 3,000 sponsors for needy children. Evangelical groups across the country called for a boycott. That's when World Vision said, yeah, we'll hire you on our staff even if you're in a same-sex marriage, which evangelicals don't like. So look at what Wehner is saying about that comparison. It's a revealing comparison. A decision by a venerated Christian relief agency to hire Christians in same-sex relationships caused an immediate, angry, and explosive reaction across the evangelical world, while the decision to effectively end a program that has saved more than 25 million lives on the African continent barely registers. Few of those who are aware of what's happening have anything to say about it, and many who are inclined to say something pull back, fear of the consequences. I appreciate this article because you have a Christian calling out other Christians, and that doesn't happen often enough. But this is such a wonderful, important point to make. You have the Trump administration and Republicans everywhere. They do not care if one of the best things a Republican has done while in office is create a government program that saves millions of lives in Africa from a devastating disease. This is something they could take credit for. Like, Donald Trump could be taking credit for helping develop the COVID vaccine, right? That was his administration's doing. The Operation Jumpstart or whatever it was, Kickstart, I forgot the name of it. Like, it helped usher in a vaccine that saved us from the scourge of COVID. But because Republicans are conspiracy theorists and anti-vaxxers, and they don't want to give credit to the government doing something right, Trump has walked away from taking any credit from that. He's like anti-vax as anybody else. And this is another example. Republicans could be taking they should be getting well-deserved credit for this, but because it involves the government doing something good to help people that they don't particularly care about, Republicans, conservative Christians who vote for them, they just don't care about one of the best things our government has ever done. It's just such a clear-cut example of Christians not giving a damn. And by the way, not just Christians, not just like conservative Christians, but pro-life Christians. Again, they'll do anything to save a fetus. They'll do anything to like harm women who want an abortion. Well, guess what? These people are living, but they are dying of HIV and AIDS unnecessarily. And these same Christians are, oh, who cares if millions of Africans die of AIDS? Who cares? We got to stop women from having an abortion because we're pro life. Like, it's so obviously hypocritical. It should make everybody angry. But even as someone who follows the news, I haven't seen a lot of reaction to the PEPFAR stuff. And Democrats who try to make an issue about it, it just doesn't gain much traction because unfortunately, I don't think anyone cares enough. Not enough people care about what's happening in Africa. Not many people are aware of what PEPFAR has done and why it's good. I think a lot of Democrats don't want to give George W. Bush credit for anything, which I kind of get, but he did this and it was good. Anyway, okay, I will stop there for this. What other questions we got here? Thank you for that donation, Sonic Shroom. Suffering forces people to God. That's the point. I mean, I don't think you're wrong about that. And they don't mind people suffering because they think they're going to pray about it. But also, if people are dying, millions of people are dying from this disease, obviously the prayer isn't doing it for them. Can't you just make the argument that God gave us George W. Bush or God gave us PEPFAR to help those people? As the old parable goes, like, God sent you the boat, get in it. Don't just wait for a miracle to happen. This is the miracle. Pro-birth and pro-life are not the same thing. You are correct. Absolutely. These Christians are pro-birth. They are very much not pro-life because they don't care if certain groups of people die because of their negligence or their cruelty or their ignorance or whatever you want to attribute it to. Wait, wasn't that Africa HIV thing also used to get missionaries over there that just preached abstinence only stuff and abstinence gay stuff? I think there is some truth to that. Again, if you think HIV and AIDS is a gay thing and that the solution is just don't have sex, which is a bad solution to anything, yeah, you're going to get a lot of very useless preaching and a lot of useless mission trips over there. But again, it should be clear from anyone who worked there in Africa helping administer PEPFAR, this has nothing to do with sex. This is stuff that just gets passed through birth. People are dying from it. It's not just a gay disease. And again, even if it was, who cares? Let's save people.